Another week means more information and more trends that Jeff Bell and I are able to find in running back and wide receiver usage. Jeff, we do this every single week. This is based around the articles that you write about usage trends. And we want to start, of course, with the New England running back room here. We saw a huge change this week. Travion Henderson completely pushed out of the game plan. Terrell Jennings was elevated from the practice squad the day before the kickoff and saw almost as many snaps and more touches than Travion Henderson. What's going on right now in Foxborough?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit pre-show about maybe we shouldn't knee jerk off of week by week reactions because, like you mentioned, you look back at usage 2 weeks ago. Travion Henderson played 50% of the snaps, and then it was a 70-30
Breakout
last
was
week.
here. Everyone
You
was
know,
getting hyped up like he's carving out that role. Only two active roster running backs on the roster. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm seeing people declaring that they're going to drop Travion Henderson, declaring they don't know what to do anymore, and you know exactly what to do. Don't put him in your lineup right now.
Right.
I mean, that's what you do right now. But realistically, if you're going to drop Travion Henderson, I know that we're the Dynasty show, so leaning more of that crew. None of that crowd is going to drop Travion Henderson. But if you're thinking about dropping Travion Henderson, look at the running backs that are available on your waiver wire and view Travion Henderson as if he were a handcuff running back. And more often than not, probably you're going to come down on, well, he's a handcuff running back in what has looked like a very, very good offense that we were very high on 6 weeks ago. To me, that sounds like the definition of a quote unquote league winning running back because they land in situations that the volume shifts their direction and all of a sudden he's in an explosive offense and he's doing everything that we would imagine that he would be doing.
So do you know why? Like, do you know the why that Travion Henderson was kind of phased out of this game? Do we have any idea? Because it does feel a little bit weird that this happened. Like we talked about, like going into week 7, the narrative around Travion Henderson was that he's carving out a bigger role, that he's looked good, that he's somebody that we can rely on, 50-50 split in back-to-back weeks. Why was it that he was just completely phased out? Do you have any insight here?
Well, I think there are a variety of things that when you look at this matchup, I mean, on some level, they probably assumed they would beat the Tennessee Titans and would
Yeah.
have some clock killing that would be involved in the game plan. I almost went to ball security, but you're not playing Ramondre Stevenson because of ball
Right.
security. I mean, that is what that is. But I do think it was the expectation that they would be running the ball a little bit more. Probably, I think some of it too. You look at they really struggled in week 6, and they probably should have because that was when they played the Saints, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's not like the Saints are a great defense, but they couldn't get the run game rolling. So part of me wonders if they wanted to see if they give Ramondre Stevenson more work, more carries, does it start to click a little bit? Do they get a little bit
Yeah.
more efficiency rolling with it? Because we do see with these running backs that when you stack some volume, they start to get into a rhythm, they start to feel better, and they start to
And I,
go
and I
with it
think
a little bit more.
Ramondre Stevenson is absolutely a rhythm runner. Like you see it, like the more touches he gets, the better he gets.
So there's that. I think that when you're looking at stacking these two backs up, you have to realize that they are now 6-7 games into implementing a new offensive scheme with a second year quarterback. And Ramondre Stevenson arguably probably knows that offense better than anybody else on the offense, given that he was
Mhm.
with McDaniels previously. And so you've got a veteran running back that should ideally know the scheme and can help implement those things. We talked about that last year with Bryce Young so often, where Bryce Young
Mhm.
struggled, and then the rest of the offense was able to be implemented while he was out with Andy Dalton, and then he was able to get plugged back in and into a better situation. On some level, Ramondre Stevenson, knowing the offense is a factor there. I think on some level, too, you've got an old school coaching staff that plays into it, that the rookies are going to earn their spots, and we're going to make sure that rookie you don't get too high on yourself or anything like that. I think that that's a little bit of an
Yeah.
old school mentality that I would see Vrabel and Josh McDaniels having that type of mentality. I think that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is they don't think Ramondre Stevenson's horrible. I know fantasy
Right.
football thinks that he is absolutely trash and horrible and should not be touching the football. The Patriots don't think that. And so they think he's actually pretty solid running back. And over time, he's shown himself to be a pretty solid running back. So when you start to stack all these things up, it probably does lean a little bit more into we've been struggling with the run game. Pass game's going great. Let's see in this game against Tennessee, this should be a good opportunity for us to get rolling on the run game. it's really hard to get two players rolling on the run game and up into rhythm. So let's stack it on Ramondre in this game. And the expectation is that we'll be killing clock in this. And so that's exactly what they did. And I've seen some concern that Trayvon Henderson wasn't in the at the end of the game situation or wasn't playing in those situations, and he's missing development time there. And I think it's important to note that that's not really development time. That's you got guys that are either out there because they're tired, or guys that are out there are tired, or they don't really belong on the field, and you're really setting yourself up for a situation that we see it all the time of one step and that ACL goes or something like that, and just the worst case outcome there relative to allowing a player to find a good situation.
Yeah, and of course, the narrative now is like, why wasn't Travion Henderson getting run late in a game that was out of hand? But had he gotten run in that game and gone down with an injury, then the narrative would be, why was Travion Henderson out there in a game that he had no business being out there in? So, yeah, I mean, we talk about this all the time, Jeff, but like, I think good fantasy football analysis is, hey, this is what the coaches are doing, and this is how you can leverage that. I think bad fantasy football analysis is, this is what the coach should be doing,
Right.
because at the end of the day, we're not the one calling to the shots. They are, and we can pick up on these trends. That's why I like digging into the show with you every single week. But let's talk about the Carolina Panthers a little bit, because we saw the first taste of action with Rico Dowdle. Cat is out of the bag. He looked fantastic. And then Chuba Hubbard back in the mix. And what we saw touch-wise was relatively a 50-50 split, but whether you're looking at the film, whether you're just watching the game live on the broadcast, the efficiency metrics, there's no argument that you can make right now for Chuba Hubbard being a better running back than Rico Dowdle. He just looks better. He's generating more yards after contact, more yards per attempt, breaking more tackles. He's just doing everything better right now. So I think that, Chuba Hubbard is a leader of that team. He's got that C on his chest, and they want to keep him a part of the offense. But, this 55-45 split that we saw last week, I think we just see a bigger and bigger chasm every single week. And my guess is that this probably settles in like a 75-25, 70-30 type of split.
Yeah, I think it was in some level ceremonial to put
Right.
Chuba Hubbard back there as the starter to kind of give that message. I think one of the things that I wrote about this week, going into this week on the Monday Roundup, was really looking at how bad some of these offenses are. And we're starting out with a team that played the Titans and the Jets, and I feel like you can lump the Dolphins in there. You can lump what we saw from the Raiders in there, and it's to the level now where like teams are toying with these teams, or teams are like, this is a situation to try something out. This is, the Chiefs basically rolled it up and put it away before halftime in that game. And
Right.
they were they were about ready to take a knee with 5 minutes left, but it was like, I think 2:27 when they officially started taking a knee with 3 timeouts. You're just getting, there's a handful of teams around the league that they're not competitive teams at all. And the Jets were one of those teams. And so the Panthers probably saw it as a situation to say, we want Chuba to know how much we value him. And we'll go with that. We'll play it heads up this game. We'll see how it goes this game. They have a very different matchup this coming week because they are playing against the Buffalo Bills. And the Panthers are in a 3-game winning streak. Things are looking very, very good for the Panthers. If it is a 50-50 split and it looks as bad as it does in this game and nothing shifts in the direction of Rico Dowdle, I mean, then we can start to maybe have a different conversation about it. But right now, I think the actionable take on this is go try to buy Rico Dowdle from somebody that
Yeah.
is convinced that Chuba Hubbard got the contract, is convinced that Dowdle is going to be a backup. I think this is a buy window for Dowdle.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes it's as simple as just the eye test, and, like, when you watch Chuba Hubbard out there, like, Chuba Hubbard is a formidable NFL running back, but, like, Rico Dowdle just brings explosion and burst and aggression that we're just not seeing from Hubbard right now. So we've talked a lot about this interior offensive line, how much they've invested in it over the years, and we know that it's a good run blocking unit, and I think Chuba Hubbard, did what he could behind that offensive line last year and in the first half of this year, but now we're just seeing a much better product on the field when they're out there with Rico Dowdle. Let's move over to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this one, Jeff, but it does seem like there was a change in the backup situation. Will Shipley's been back for the last couple of weeks, but wasn't getting almost any usage as he was coming back from broken ribs that he suffered in week one. A.J. Dillon was a healthy scratch in this game. Will Shipley got a couple of touches. And then Tank Bigsby got his first offensive touch since the Eagles traded for him almost a month ago. So what are we doing here? Like, who is the backup? Is it Will Shipley? Is it Tank Bigsby, or is it just not AJ Dillon? I think that's probably the biggest takeaway.
Well, first, that's the biggest takeaway. And I don't know if people were even realizing that AJ Dillon was slotted in to be the backup or we're adding AJ
I
Dillon
I
because
talked about it on last week's waiver show, and it felt gross. I was like, "But AJ Dillon's getting touches. Like, I think he's the handcuff here." And then immediately a healthy scratch once Will Shipley's back to 100%.
yeah, and it's interesting because should Saquon Barkley miss time, and I mean things are starting to stack up a little bit. He had concussion evaluation last week. There was a shoulder that the training staff was looking at late in that game. We haven't seen him be the explosive Saquon Barkley, so you don't know what's going to happen there. But to me, it's a little bit concerning in terms of you look at it and you see this is a high upside offense that ideally it should be a high upside offense. That said, we know there's not a big passing game role here for the running back. And we know short yardage, what happens there. There's not really a goal line role for the running back. And Saquon Barkley was able to have that fantastic year he had last year because he was able to break so many explosive runs. My expectation would be if Saquon Barkley were to miss time, you would have Shipley as the top side of a committee with both Shipley and Bigsby getting work. And you would kind of be like the idea of it would be better than the reality of it, where the ideal of it
Right.
is like, I want to plug
The
Shipley
idea
into
of it is that
this.
you're getting 2024 Saquon.
Yes, in the backup form of Will Shipley. The reality of it
Right.
is you're probably getting a flex play.
Yeah, and if you look at it, I mean, the production for Saquon has just been abysmal this year. And you talk about the lack of breakaway runs. I mean, last year I ran these numbers a while ago. He was ripping off a 20+ yard play once in every 22 touches, like basically averaging that every single game. Through 7 weeks now, he's at 113 carries, hasn't had a single carry of over 19 yards. So it's just that it's that simple. Like he's not getting through the second level like he did last year. Maybe Shipley can, maybe Tank Bigsby can, but either way, I think that the actionable thing here is to stash Will Shipley. We don't know if Saquon's going to miss any time or what's going to happen with him, but just I think that is the injury away handcuff that you want to stash here. Let's move on to the Houston Texans, Jeff, because we saw a change, not so much a change, but we did see. I mean, it's kind of gone back and forth. Like we saw the big Woody Marks breakout a few weeks ago, and then coming out of the bye, there was hope that they'd be able, or not coming out of the bye. I'm sorry. The very next week, we thought that Woody Marks had taken over the backfield, and Nick Chubb was the preferred guy. And now coming out of the bye, we see Woody Marks get 10 carries to Nick Chubb's 5. We see him get 5 targets to Nick Chubb's 3. Neither looked especially good, if I'm being honest, but it does look like Woody Marks is starting to pull away with this workload a little bit. What are we doing here? And like, does it even matter? I almost wonder if the Houston Texans offense is so bad that whoever the lead back is in this offense might not even matter for fantasy purposes.
In PPR, I think it does matter, or at least it did last night. And part of that was because Woody Marks was able to get into the end zone late in that game. But I think I think this offense has enough need for a passing back and has a passing back role that you can get there in PPR in certain matchups. And
Yeah.
Seattle is a very, very good run defense. They got beat by the pass in a couple of their matchups, but they're a really good run defense. And so we said on last Friday's preview show that I don't think it's going to be a Chubb week. I think it would be a Woody Marks week if it's anybody's week. And Seattle was able to build a lead. They were playing from behind that allowed Woody Marks to have some volume in the passing game, find his way into the end zone because the rushing game was brutal. That offensive line is bad. So and if you watch the game, Woody Marks did look explosive in spurts.
He
It
did.
was just
Yeah.
kind of one of the young running back who has to learn where to go, where to take your yards. I think that's part of it. I think the other thing that you're really looking at matchups probably when you're looking at this backfield. And so they play the 49ers coming up. And I don't know after what the 49ers did to the Falcons offense, after what the Falcons offense did to the Bills, I'm a little bit nervous about anybody against the 49ers, but should I have to go one direction or the other, it would be Woody Marks that I would go with in that matchup because I would assume that the offense can move the ball and score some points for the 49ers, and the Texans would have to go into the passing mode at some level.
So let's stick with this game because at the end of the game, we saw Nico Collins left with a concussion and being evaluated for a concussion. There's still the ability that he can practice this week and get out there next week. No reason to panic yet. But I think the major takeaway here is that when he left, I think most people just assume that, especially in a game without Christian Kirk, we would just see Jaden Higgins kind of operating in that Nico Collins role, the X receiver who's running those routes, getting those targets. But it was Jalen Knoll who really stepped up as the go to option late in the game. Now, I'm a huge fan of Jalen Knoll. Talked about this guy a ton during the rookie scouting, during the draft season. Just a really fun player, a smaller guy, but he's got good athleticism. He's a good route runner, can make contested catches, can make plays after the catch. And we saw him step up in a big way. Now, is that more of Christian Kirk being out or more of Nico Collins being out, or do you think it's just kind of a product of both?
I think it's a product of that offensive line being horrible and them not being able to attack outside of the numbers is where it really comes down, because we saw heavy volume for Dalton Schultz and we saw volume for Jalen Knoll. And I think that's where it breaks down. And if you don't have Nico Collins out there, you've got Xavier Hutchinson, you've got Jaden Higgins. I don't know that either right now are capable of consistently winning outside. And if you can't go outside because the offensive line doesn't allow you the time to get out there, and CJ Stroud looks kind of shook at this point in time. He's
Mhm.
just taking the struggle targets is what he's taking. It's like almost like the Miami thing from last year where we're just going to dump down to the tight end a whole bunch of times, and we've got this wide receiver that we can utilize in the short game, and that's just what we're going with right now. And we're not seeing it out of Nico Collins, and largely we're not seeing it out of Nico Collins because they're not able to do the things that Nico Collins is very good at. They're not able to threaten down the field. They're not able to. Nico Collins, in my mind, he's always running the same route. It's always that in breaking route about 15 to 18 yards downfield, and I think he's
Skinny
the best in the
post.
league at it.
That's it. Like
And
that skinny post is unguardable when he's running it.
yes, yeah, and they can't get to that. So it's really the offensive line. We knew it was going to be the offensive line. We knew the offensive line was going to be a problem when they told everybody like, oh, these late rookies are doing a fantastic job. Like we got rid of Laramie Tunsil and Shaq Mason. We're going to be great because they weren't running the right plays last year. And it turns out when you get rid of a tackle like Laramie Tunsil and a good guard like Shaq Mason, your offensive line is not very good at all.
Yeah. So what's the actionable takeaway here, would you say? Would you say that Jalen Knoll is worth a pickup? Would you say that maybe
Yeah,
we're looking
I
at
think
Jaden Higgins if they have a week to game plan? Or do you think that let's just in this hypothetical world say that going into next week, there's no Nico Collins and there is no Christian Kirk. Who would you pick between Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll?
I think to me it's Noel. It's Noel and it's Schultz would be the two pieces that you want right now
Yeah,
because
Schultz, absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
9 of 10 targets for 98 yards, like by far, like across the board, season highs in targets, receptions, and yards. And we saw him starting to heat up coming into this game. He had 3 straight games with 6 targets coming into this week, so he was starting to heat up.
Yeah, and it's we're just really seeing again, I'd put Houston on that stack of offenses that are just avoid situations. And at some
Yeah.
level, I mentioned in my article, looking ahead at some of the playoff matchups that like the Raiders have, the Jets have, the Titans have, the Dolphins have, maybe Houston's in there too, given how good their defense is. At some level, if you're going to be proactive about, especially a redraft league, like maybe you should be looking at avoiding some of those matchups, and that
Yeah.
pushes against where I've usually landed because usually I'll think to I'll kind of sarcastically say, well, you don't want to play this guy because you're afraid his team is going to score too many points. Like that doesn't compete with me. But we're not seeing that really. We're not seeing scoring too many points. We're seeing these teams can put it in the garage by halftime and kickers that can hit from 60 yards out and just ultra conservative game plans.
That definitely changes things up a little bit. Now, I do want to talk about Kansas City, and we can talk about both the running backs and the wide receivers. Because I think there were some pretty good takeaways from this week. And of course, you can't put too much into the usage. I know a lot of people are just going to like look at the raw numbers and say, like, oh, the Brashad Smith takeover is here. When the reality is most of his touches came in garbage time. But Jeff, I've been a big Brashard Smith fan for almost a year now. Like ever since I watched this guy, the landing spot, there's a lot to get excited about here. And now the efficiency numbers. He is leading all running backs in yards per route run. He's leading all running backs in targets per route run. And to me, this just feels so similar to Rashee Rice's rookie season, where we saw the first half of the year, we were looking at this mind blowing efficiency for Rashee Rice and saying, man, just imagine if this role grows a little bit. And now we're seeing the same thing with Brashad Smith. And in this game, we did see the role grow and he maintained his good efficiency. So I'm not ready to say that he's going to take over the backfield and, just like put Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt out of work. But I think that we're starting to see him get a little bit more acclimated to the NFL speed, starting to look a little bit better in some of these opportunities. And I know there are a lot of mouths to feed with Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy and Marquise Brown. But I still think that there's enough with how much they spread the ball around here that Brashard Smith can be somebody that we can rely on late in the year.
So we saw Kareem Hunt leave with injury. He got,
Yeah.
I think, get carried off the field, and then he did play one
He
snap.
returned. Yeah, he came back
I
in
think he
after that.
played one snap in the second half. So everybody that is playing with fair play on any sports books, it basically just like came back and said "screw you" to everybody that had bet on Kareem Hunt because he played a snap in the second half, but then didn't do anything. I mean,
We saw
again,
CeeDee Lamb do the same thing a month ago. Yeah, that's never fun when you've got those tickets open.
and yeah, I've talked about it all show, but they were playing against the Raiders, and the Raiders weren't threatening at all. And so taking away anything usage wise in this game, I think requires a massive grain of salt because had this been remotely competitive, then you probably Rashee Rice probably would have caught 15 balls the way that he was going in this game.
Right.
But they're able to put it in the garage at halftime. And at some level, this isn't like an SEC team playing a directional Louisiana school. You don't have 8 running backs on your roster that you can let's get the freshmen in to get some reps. Like you've only got so many active bodies. And if Kareem Hunt's out of there, then you're pretty much limited to having Isaiah Pacheco and Brashard Smith. So it's like if you want to point to Brashad Smith's usage in terms of the run game in this game, I mean, he got it, and he looks like an actual running back for the first time, and I think
Right.
that's maybe my bigger takeaway of for the first time they allowed him to look like a running back, and he looked like a running back because before it looked like a gadget player that had just scheme touches. He's getting there in the passing game. PPR, I think he can be somewhat of a worthwhile consideration, but I really hesitate because I don't think that we've seen the Chiefs offense with Rashee Rice, even though we saw a half with it. And the half we did see, it looked like Rice is going to catch 15 balls in every game.
So let's talk about that a little bit because you say like you can't take away a ton from this game, and I'm completely with you. Like we saw them just trotting out the second team for the second half of the game, but are you concerned at all about the lack of usage for Xavier Worthy, or is this also like you think kind of like ceremoniously, as you said earlier when talking about Chuba Hubbard? Do you think that just having Rashee Rice back, they said we're going to make him the focal point of the offense, we're going to get him in the end zone, like we're going to make him feel like he's a part of the team? Do you think that like what we saw, just the 4 targets going Xavier Worthy's way? Do you think that he is a guy now who could fall into more of that boom bust category as the offense just kind of focuses on Rashee Rice?
He had 4 targets, but had he played a full game, it'd probably be 8 or 9 targets. And he
Right.
is the type of player that's explosive enough to score in any play. I think that
This to
they
me, it
we
feels so reminiscent. Like Rashee Rice is Amon St. Brown, Xavier Worthy is
yeah,
Jameson Williams, just on a better offense.
I think that is a fair consideration to view it that way. I would say that Kansas City has thrown the ball more than any team in the league, and we just talked about their running backs, but I don't think they have any running backs
Right.
to be blunt there. And so I do think that I don't know. We're gonna go there. I probably anyways. Well, maybe our next show will go there. But I think that they are smart enough offensively that if they feel like Rashee Rice or not Rashee Rice, but Xavier Worthy is disappearing, that they'll make sure that Xavier Worthy doesn't feel like he's disappearing. Is probably where I land there. Whereas some other organizations might care a little bit less about whether a wide receiver feels involved or not.
Yeah, and I think the tough thing too is like it's so hard to draw anything from any of the games that we've seen Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy playing together because last year it was Xavier Worthy's first couple games of NFL action, and we know how hard it is to get up to speed immediately. So
Yeah.
we saw Xavier Worthy kind of changing his role throughout the season as different needs were required in the Chiefs passing attack. And then this first game back, just an absolute barn burner in the first half. We see Rashee Rice kind of force the ball a lot. So we're a year and a half into Xavier Worthy's career now, and we don't know exactly how he's going to be able to cohabitate alongside Rashee Rice. Hopefully, we'll get more answers next week. But what was that, Jeff?
I mean, I've seen Xavier Worthy do everything, so I feel like Xavier Worthy can cohabitate next to just about anybody at this point in time. Because I think it's really simplistic for us to say, well, Worthy only became fantasy relevant because they put him in Rashee Rice's role, but it's really to have a rookie wide receiver that learned one role for most of his camp, most of his offseason. Like, hey, we want to get you on the field. We want to utilize your speed to stretch the defense. Like, that's going to be your job. More often than not, rookie wide receivers we see they're asked to basically master one skill. And then once you've mastered that one skill at the NFL level, let's start layering it on. And so I think in our minds, in like playing Madden and like in the sandbox and all these things, it's simplistic to think, well, they just put him in Rashee Rice's role. The fact that Xavier Worthy midstream in the middle of his rookie year was able to transition from being basically a deep shot player to a focal point of the offense to be involved in other areas of the field should tell you a lot about Xavier Worthy's ability and about how they view Xavier Worthy's ability.
Yeah, and I know we've had this discussion before. I think my pushback there is that he was like in that role, but he wasn't very efficient in that role. Like he was just kind of existing in that role and he was getting the targets, but he wasn't scoring a lot of touchdowns and he wasn't getting a lot of yards. So he was able to do it, but I still think that like when they've got this whole arsenal of weapons, which is crazy to think. Last week was the first time we ever saw Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Marquise Brown playing together. I think that we do see, a little bit more elasticity than we've seen from Andy Reid historically. But I think they want Worthy mostly playing in that downfield role where he can stretch the field because we've seen like the Chiefs have their deep ball back now. And I think having this kind of high low scheme where you can have Xavier Worthy doing the deep stuff, Rashee Rice doing the underneath stuff, I think that does make a lot more sense schematically. We'll see how it shakes out. And like I said, I don't feel like we can really draw any conclusions because we saw the first couple of games of Xavier Worthy's rookie season, and now this one game back that they just blew the doors off of it. So interested to see how this kind of develops in the future here. I don't think I'll put it this way. I didn't do much of anything with Xavier Worthy in my rest of season rankings. Like he was a high end wide receiver 2 going into last week. He's still a high end wide receiver 2 for me in this week. But if we see another game where it's just, Rashee Rice pulling 2.5 times as many targets as Xavier Worthy, then I might have to start considering moving him down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, 7 targets, 6 receptions, 85 yards, a touchdown, 2 rushes, 16 yards in the AFC title game last year. I mean, he had 8 for 157 and 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. We know that got lopsided. That was a little bit different, but that Bills game was back and forth. I mean, that's some pretty difficult situations. I would say that I hear you on the deep vertical. The thing that Xavier Worthy adds to the game is he runs those orbit motions. They get him involved in jet sweeps, like just creating ways to get the ball in his hands. And like think about it of like the way that like let's envision this here, where let's say you've got Rashee Rice lined up to the right. And let's say you've got Hollywood Brown lined up on the outside. And on the left is Xavier Worthy. And so the play that I'm envisioning in my mind is basically you've got Hollywood Brown running a vertical as a clear out. You've got Xavier Worthy working through the middle of the field as a slant. And following that backside of that play is Xavier or Rashee Rice busting up
Rashee
the slant. And then following the backside of that is Worthy coming around on that motion where you can either attack, you're reading, you're putting the defensive backs in conflict, you're making them make the decision, and you're either attacking vertically with either Thigpen or with Hollywood Brown. You've got the slant that you can smash to Rice, and if the defense is overplaying those, okay, well then we're going to flip the ball to Xavier Worthy, the fastest guy in the NFL. He's going to catch the ball in full movement and look out because he's going to be creating after the catch. Like I feel like a lot of the ability to do that kind of work is my expectation for this offense.
Let's move on to the Chicago Bears, and this is the last one we'll talk about today. And I want to talk about both the running backs and the wide receivers here, Jeff, and even some tight ends. We're just going to talk about the Bears as a whole because there were some interesting usage changes that we've seen now since coming out of the bye. First of all, we don't talk about this on many fantasy football shows, but the offensive line has looked amazing since coming out of the bye. We know that they invested heavily in Joe Tooney and Drew Dahlman and Jonah Jackson, and all of these guys are playing at a very high level right now, and it's made DeAndre Swift's job much easier. It's made Caleb Williams' job much easier as well. But I think the major takeaway here, at least for me, and there's a lot of takeaways from this game, is that we saw Kyle Monangai heavily involved. And this was not garbage time. This was not a blowout. I mean, this was a game that was a one-score game through the fourth quarter. And we saw Kyle Monangai out there getting 13 carries to DeAndre Swift's 19. He had 3 targets to DeAndre Swift's 1. And we saw him earlier in the year starting to carve out a role as just kind of the pass catching back. But now we see him getting a lot of work as a runner as well. So what are we looking at here? I mean, DeAndre Swift is clearly the preferred guy. He has looked great over the last couple of weeks, 303 scrimmage yards over the last 2 weeks combined. But Kyle Monangai, we heard Ben Johnson talking about him a lot this offseason, saying that he was a guy that they wanted to rely on late in the year. And I don't know if we're late in the year yet, but we're getting to the midway point of the year, and we're starting to see this pie slice grow every week for Monangai.
Yeah, it takes when you're putting a new scheme, the run game is the thing that takes the longest to feel comfortable and to get up and rolling. And they said during the broadcast that the Bears really invested heavily during the bye on let's solve this run game. And we've seen now that the Washington game was a weather game 2 weeks ago, and then we saw the Saints, they had a lead for most of the game against the Saints. So they've been in situations to allow them to lean into the run game, or that they've needed to lean into the run game because of what they were operating with, or because of what they had earned to be able to operate with. So that's part of it. But I think that the other part of it is we had the expectation that there would be a 2-headed running back committee, because that's what we saw Ben Johnson in Detroit last year with Jahmyr Gibbs, with David Montgomery. And this is basically the Dollar General
Not just last year.
version of
You can go all the way back to Jamal
yeah,
Williams, DeAndre Swift. Like, it's not
right,
just last year. Like, Ben
right.
Johnson always splits the backfield.
Right. And so this is the dollar store version, Dollar General version of the Detroit backfield, basically now at this point. And I think it's, to me, I mean, I'm buying Rome Odunze because I think that he looked very, very talented early before the bye. I think he just missed a couple plays in the Washington game that would
Mhm.
change the narrative entirely about him. But I'm seeing a lot of first read numbers and these things being put out about Rome Odunze and kind of throwing the panic flag up about Odunze. To me, they're rolling with the run game in 2 games that they allowed the situation to roll with the run game. Let's go with that. Let's let that work. And then as they you're just building layers on, like, when you're Ben Johnson's building his offense, he's just building layers into it. And the first layer, the first couple weeks was survival, basically. And survival was Rome Odunze is my best receiver. Got Caleb Williams. We got to survive. We got to figure this out. And this is our best way to be able to win games. And now you've added the run game element onto it. And so you're able to lean into let's build the run game, and then a defense will figure out how to slow that down a little bit, and then that's when you can counterpunch. And so you're just building layers on top of the offense, and you end up with a complete picture when you get to the end of it.
So I also, I don't know how much more we have to talk about the receivers. Luther Burden is still kind of in his part-time role. I don't think that's going to change too much. But I think the tight ends are where things get really interesting, because in week 6, 2 weeks ago, we saw Colston Loveland. More routes, more targets, more receptions, more yards. It looked like he kind of took the role from Cole Kmet. And then last week, where Cole Kmet was injured, we saw Colston Loveland play near a full-time role. And I mean, nothing to write home about. 3 catches on 4 targets for 24 yards, but also getting very involved as a blocker, running a lot of routes, kind of looking like the top 10 talent that he was drafted to be. And there's a lot of blessing in disguise talk that I've heard from the Chicago beat so far. Cole Kmet was a veteran. He does a lot of things well, but he's also had some really tough drops this year. Like, there have been some not great plays from him as well. So I think with him out of the picture now, I mean, now the runway is just cleared for a Colston Loveland takeoff. And of course, there's a lot of mouths to feed here. We still got Rome Odunze. Olamide Zaccheaus is going to get his. DJ Moore is getting more involved every single week. So this kind of, to me, kind of feels like my reason for writing off Rondé Gadsden a little bit, that there's just too many mouths to feed in this offense. I don't know how much the fourth option is going to be able to do here, but I'm still intrigued that Colston Loveland is starting to take over as the primary tight end now.
Yeah, I mean, my thought is I think Colston Loveland could be the number 2 option very, very soon.
Yeah.
When you look at that, and I hear you on the fourth option, but
A DJ Moore trade, is that what you're kind of speculating?
well, I mean, just quality of play at some level. I think it's part of it. I mean, and the development and seeing a guy that you took in the top 10. I mean, we're seeing what Tyler Warren is doing. And that's not that far away from Chicago. And while they might be their own bubbles, Indianapolis is not that far away from Chicago. And the talk
Yeah.
all about Warren is, um, you know, Ben Johnson probably is slightly aware, at least a little bit, of what's going on with Tyler Warren. And I feel like Ben Johnson's a competitive enough guy to kind of be like, now I'm going to show you that I didn't not make the wrong decision here. Is probably some of it. We've talked. I know we talked a couple weeks ago, but we talked about you've got Caleb Williams in, and you were just trying to build Caleb Williams' confidence up to get him to that place. And part of that would be relying on the veterans to build that confidence up. And now you're rolling. You got a 4-game win streak going on. We've got the run game going. Like let's get Loveland going. Let's get the rookie going and get him involved. And part of it is Komet being injured out of the lineup, but part of it too, the ceiling is so much higher for Loveland than it is with Komet. We all know that. That's very obvious just from what we've seen so far on the field. And so because the injury allows for it, but just probably the natural progression, the flow of it, as you've got these other pieces, you've got the offensive line rolling, playing very well now. You've got the running backs rolling, playing very well now. You had Odunze got comfortable. And then now let's get Loveland going. And we're going to add another layer onto the offense.
So I was very much so a Tyler Warren ahead of Colston Loveland guy during the draft season and wasn't too thrilled that the Bears took Loveland instead of Warren. That being said, I do understand why they did it. I mean, like we had Tyler Warren ahead of Colston Loveland in our redraft rankings because he's an older prospect, he's a bigger prospect, he wasn't coming back from injury, less target competition. Like there's a lot of reasons to like the immediate production from Tyler Warren better. But am I just coping here, Jeff, by like still looking at Loveland as potentially the better long-term prospect, a guy who's 4 years younger, a guy who like missed OTAs and missed mini camps and missed the beginning of the preseason as he was recovering from a shoulder injury. I was kind of looking at this year as like hopeful that he could step out, but also like if it was just a complete wash, I'd understand. I still think that there's reason to be excited about Colston Loveland's long-term development and the fact that he might be a better tight end than Tyler Warren long-term, even if that seems completely far-fetched right now through the first month and a half of their respective careers.
I think so there's multiple different tight end positions. First off,
Right.
there's multiple different places.
Tyler Warren he's a Tucker Craft type where they scheme up a
He's
lot of touches where he
he's
can
a
just catch the ball in the flat and just freight train his way down the field, which is great. Like some guys are really good at doing that.
he's a Gronk. He's like Gronk
Yeah,
smash, basically. Tyler Warren
100%.
smash is what it is. And then Loveland, I think, is more the Travis Kelsey mold, where like
Yeah,
I think that he can develop to be a little bit more of a natural receiver. I think that when you look at, I think Travis Kelsey and Rob Gronkowski are both amazing, great players. They technically play the same position. They play that position differently. Travis
right.
Kelsey was more of a slot receiver, kind of that was a tight end that could give you good blocking from the tight end position, not great blocking. And Rob Gronkowski can be a racer when it comes to the run game. And some of you can leak him out and give him the ball and let him get ahead of steam, but really you want him building up that head of steam downfield, get him downfield, and then get a defensive back trying to match up on him. And that defensive back is in big trouble because nobody's matching up with Gronk downfield, especially somebody that is built to run downfield. So that creates like it's kind of you want to get him down the field before you throw him the ball because the yak might not be the best when he's running in traffic. Whereas Kelsey is a little bit more able to find the spaces, find the creases, and create in that way.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. There's just different types of receivers. I think that's the best way to put it. Well, Jeff, any other final notes from Week 7 on usage trends that you have noticed?
Yeah, I think like I don't know, I try to maybe pick up themes every single week or try to focus on kind of a key idea, but really I'm trying to right now is just focus on the key idea of like let's try to not get 1 week and like everything whatever happened that week is the only thing that matters, because I think when you start to look back a couple weeks and build a picture and then forward a couple weeks and build a picture, and you need to recognize, I said a couple weeks ago, that the offensive coordinators, their job is deception. Their job is to utilize their weapons in a way that the defense is not going to expect. And some of that is it results in games where the guys that we want touching the ball don't get to touch the ball as much as we want. But if a team is winning, I feel like I have a really hard time pushing it back against what their plan is if they're winning. And so I think that just kind of looking holistically, seeing how you think that something can develop in a situation, not so much what was the exact last thing that I saw.
And now you understand the plight of me trying to do weekly rest of season rankings, like wanting to react to what I just saw while not overreacting and trying to like incrementally move these players around. It's a tough balance. Like we want to take in as much information as we can. We also want to try to notice trends and throw away the outlier weeks, and that's what we try to do here on this show: is add context to all of these situations. I want to thank everyone who took the time to tune in today. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about some of the biggest risers and fallers coming out of Week 7. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.